Welcome back to Getting Caught Up. A couple of days ago, I got a text message from a good friend of mine, Adam Wade. He's been on this podcast a couple of times. You should check out those episodes. And Wade sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post from a guy named Ryan Noggle, who we were NBC Pages with many years ago. The Facebook post had a photo of some people on stage and a short message announcing that a stage production called Charlie Hustle, about the life of baseball legend Pete Rose, was in production and that more big news was coming. Now, Wade didn't know much more about it than that, but said this would be great for your podcast. Literally, the next day, Pete Rose died. So it turns out Ryan, who is a longtime TV writer and producer, has been working on a musical about Pete Rose for the last 11 years. It's a major passion project for him, and I had a chance to catch up with him and hear all about it. Ryan told me about where the idea came from, the long road to getting it to the stage, including why, after several years, he scrapped all the original songs he wrote and started over completely from scratch. We talked about how he actually met Pete Rose twice while researching the project, and that he played the songs that are in the musical for Pete. Pete gave him his blessing on the project, and Ryan shared the one note the baseball legend gave him for how he should approach the show. We also took a look at a clip from rehearsals, which just started, of the actor who plays Pete singing Mr. 4192, one of the show's climactic songs. Ryan and I also discussed what a complex figure Pete Rose was and is, and how his life story is like a Shakespearean tragedy, which is a big part of why Ryan wanted to tell this story. And we took a look at some classic highlights from Rose's unparalleled baseball career. Charlie Hustle is not all that Ryan's got going on right now. If you're a fan of the TV show Survivor, you're going to love Survivor in a Day, which Ryan launched a few years ago and is really taking off now. It's basically sort of a backyard version of Survivor that takes one day instead of 40 days or so. And I'm telling you, when you see some highlights from it, you're going to want to play. And good news for you, they're actually planning to start taking auditions for the competition in the near future. Quick reminder, please give this episode a like, share, or comment to help with its visibility so I can keep bringing you conversations with interesting people like Ryan. And as I mentioned, Ryan is also a former NBC Page, so for any Pages who are watching, you'll definitely want to hear about his unusual strategy for landing his all-important first interview for the Page program. He also talked about some of his other memories from working at 30 Rock, his assignment as an 8H desk page, and how he got his first joke on SNL's Weekend Update. It was a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. So here he is from LA, Ryan Noggle. All right, Ryan Noggle, welcome. How the hell are you doing? It's been, God, how many years?
Well, let's see. I was at Page in 2000, so I really haven't seen you since. So around 24, 23 years, something like that.
Yeah,
Your name has popped up from time to time in mixed groups, but I've never really talked to you in a long, long time.
it's been a while. I know that. So it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's
And
great to see you.
yeah, do people know what you're up to? Because I certainly didn't. And thank God Adam Wade texted me a few days ago with
Oh,
this Facebook post that you put up.
yeah. I don't talk about it a lot, only because I'm part of it's like superstition or like not wanting to jinx it until there's like something really concrete to talk about. So every once in a while when there was, a turning point with the project, then I would post something maybe every couple of years, maybe. But I posted a couple of days ago because we're in rehearsals now for the first production of Charlie Hustle, a musical I've been working on for a very long time. So to answer your question, do people know? I think if you follow me on Facebook, then you probably have seen me post over the years. It's been a long, long time coming. People probably think it's the project that will never die. Ryan just keeps posting about this thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, thanks for talking to me about this because well, first of all, it's not just that. It's also you've got this Survivor thing going on, which we'll touch on a little bit later in this episode. But
yeah.
this Pete Rose thing is amazing. I had no idea about it. I saw that and it just seemed like such a cool thing. And then incredibly strangely, Pete Rose basically died on a couple of days ago now, literally a day after Wade texted me. Adam Wade Shout
Yeah.
out to him. He
Yeah.
texted me and was like, "Yo, you should get Ryan Noggle on your podcast. This he's doing this cool thing, this Pete Rose thing, but he didn't know much about it either." So
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy timing. I mean, our rehearsal started like the day before he died. Like the cast spent the entire summer researching him and learning music and just like doing deep dives. 'Cause a lot of them didn't know Pete because the cast is just a little bit too young to like have watched Pete play. So they were like learning all about, spent all summer learning him, and then rehearsal start one day, and the next day he dies.
wow,
So the timing is eerie, and I met with Pete last summer, and he seemed spry and quick-witted and healthy and walking, and so I would have thought he had a decade left in him. He was 83, but just so sharp and sharp as a tack. So it came as a huge shock to me. My phone just started blowing up. A lot of my friends associate me with Pete just because of the project's been going on for a while, and they know that I've put a lot of time into him. So the phone just started blowing up, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. My phone, I was like, oh my God, he died.
yeah. I think it was. I mean, he's old, older, but came as a shock. I think for
Yeah.
everybody.
And
So
it's like it's going to happen, at some point, and it's going to affect the show. I knew I would need to rewrite my ending. I always knew that my show, the last chapter, hadn't been written yet because it's still a current story. Pete's alive. He's still applying for reinstatement. So I'm like, okay, there could be a final chapter to this that we'll need to incorporate at some point into the show. And we didn't realize that was going to be this week.
right.
uh, so I spent literally last night, up late rewriting the ending, and because they're in the middle of rehearsals, I needed to get them new pages. So
Wow.
that's what we're doing. We're working in real time here.
Yeah, working on the fly. So you met Pete Rose. Were you met with him as research for this project?
Yeah, I met with Pete twice. I met with Pete at the very beginning. I think I had written 5 songs, um, and then my agent sent his agent a demo and said, "Hey, my client's working on this thing. We'd like for Pete to listen to the demo and then meet with Ryan." And so he did that. He listened, and then we set up a meeting, and I flew to meet him, and then got his blessing. Um, he it's funny. He said, "I've got one note for you," and I kind of like was bracing myself, like, "Oh boy, okay." Because I got one note for you, kid. He called me kid. He goes, "There's a lot of bad stuff in my story, and you got to put it all in." So I walked away thinking, all right, Pete is finally owning his transgressions. He is accepting, the truth of the story. So I said, great, Pete, I will. And even though I'm a diehard Reds fan and grew up rooting for Pete, I really wanted the show to not pander in one direction or the other. I didn't want it to be a puff piece or to paint him as a martyr or a victim. I wanted to tell the story very evenly and present a very interesting case for the audience to discuss after the show as they're going to their favorite watering hole. So Pete, basically gave me the green light to just tell the story however I needed to and wanted to, and then I met with him last summer just as a letting him know that this production was happening, and inviting him, and I always kind of imagined him sitting in the lobby signing programs after the
Yeah.
show. And I guess that'll never happen now.
Yeah, that's too bad because it sounds like he sounds like he was excited about it and wanted and he sort of endorsed it, right?
He was all in. I don't think he had read a full script yet, or he hadn't seen anything yet other than those early songs, which had changed a lot by then. But he was fully on board. We were going to, strike some sort of life rights deal with him, similar to Frankie Valli and Jersey Boys. And I think Pete saw it as just a way of telling his story and shining a light on his brand and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
you
Now,
know,
when you're showing Pete Rose or playing these songs for Pete Rose, how does that work exactly? You fly out to his house and you sit down with him and play a tape, or do you like sing the song yourself? Like how's this all work?
I definitely don't sing the song myself, because that would not make him like the show. I can tell you that he would have run far away from it if I was trying to sing. No, my agent sent him a demo, or sent his agent a demo, and it got it to him, and so he listened to the songs not with me there. And then I flew to his house. He lives in Vegas. He lived in Vegas for part of the year, So that's where he was. And so I flew to Vegas from LA and met with him. And he had listened to the songs by then. And we just had a nice talk about it.
What was his initial feedback? Like, when I think of Pete Rose, I don't think of like a musical theater type of guy. So
Yeah.
was this sort of new for him, or what was his take?
No, that's a common reaction. People just kind of go, huh? What? A musical about Pete Rose? But if you think about it, he's no further away from music than Alexander Hamilton was.
Yeah.
And that worked out okay. So, even though the initial reaction is weird about it, if if it's done well, and it's only weird until you've seen it, and then you go, oh, okay, it's just a story. It's just a story. Baseball's a backdrop of this show. It's not front and center. There's only one scene takes place on a baseball field, him breaking Ty Cobb's record. But the rest of it is behind the scenes, his scandal in his life and his workings with his father and his friends, and telling really the story of what's happened with his downfall. But at the core of it, it's a Shakespearean tragedy. It's a man who was on top of his world, literally the king of his world, and then crumbled to the ground and became the ultimate villain of his world. And he's the only, or he was until 2 days ago, the only living person banned from baseball. Even though he has all these records, including the most hits. And so, I mean, that is epic. That is Shakespearean. That is,
Yeah.
a a rise and fall of the utmost degree. So you can't put a guy on a higher pedestal than he was on in the 70s in baseball and early 80s, and you can't knock him down any lower than he is now. It goes from one extreme to the other. And so once I just kind of started really marinating on that, I go, this is a story. This isn't even about baseball. This is just an epic story
Yeah.
about a collapse of a man, and it's a cautionary tale, and there are a lot of themes that run throughout. But I said, there's no reason why this can't be a musical just because he played baseball as a career. It's an emotional story, and music really heightens emotion. And plus I just always wanted to write a musical. My whole time living in New York, I'd go to every show that I could possibly go to, and so I always knew I had one in me, and I just kind of needed the right story to and the right timing. And then when I locked on this, it kind of just made a lot of sense. And I thought this is going to be different, unexpected, never been told before on a stage, and it's going to attract an audience that maybe isn't a traditional musical theater audience, while still attracting the traditional musical theater audience too, because of just the emotion, the humanity, the love, the emotion that's in it already. I just need to market it in a way to convince people that it's not a baseball show, which it truly is not. It's
Right.
just baseball is happening in the background the whole time. It's like saying you'll only like Rocky if you're into boxing.
Right. Right. I think the Hamilton comparison is quite apt, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a great. I mean, that was an amazing play or musical.
Yeah. It's
But
not like people aren't passionate about Alexander Hamilton. People don't, they
no,
barely know who he is. They're like, I think he's on the 10. People think he's a president of, even though he wasn't. Like, no one really knows. But then when the show was made at that quality and the word of mouth is so good, and Lynn is obviously a modern day Shakespeare. Like, when all those pieces come together, then you go, okay, sure, I'm along for the ride. I'll enjoy this musical, even though it doesn't really make sense.
absolutely. I mean, honestly, I thought the show educated me on Alexander Hamilton. I didn't know all that much about him. Whatever, maybe forgot what I learned in history class.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's great, and it was a great way to make him accessible to an
Yeah.
audience. But anyway, with Pete Rose, you said something about him being Shakespearean, and I hadn't thought about that, but I think that is spot on, because his story, like if you think about it, his story really just it strikes a chord with people. There are people who have strong opinions about him, one way or another,
One way
and
or the other. He's not boring. You
yeah,
could go to any sports bar today and strike up a conversation, and people will have opinions, or look at any social media post. It'll be hundreds, if not thousands, of comments of one way or the other. He's a bum. No, he deserves the hall. But like, everyone has an opinion about him, right? He's one of the most polarizing, controversial, provocative, interesting, complex people in sports history, hands down. What's a bigger scandal, to this proportion in sports, where you're talking about one of the greatest players to ever play, and more hits than anyone, more games played, more at bats. He has like 9 records. Think about the thousands of people who play
yeah,
baseball, tens of thousands. He has all these records, and yet he's the one pariah, the ultimate villain of the game. Um, And I'm not saying what he did was not wrong, but it is a Shakespearean tale. And what you said a minute ago about Hamilton, about you learned a lot about Hamilton from the show, and that's what people will take away from Charlie Hustle. Even as a Reds fan, even I grew up with Pete Rose in my head every day in a little league field, and like I lived through the scandal. And you think the story, sports fans, baseball fans, Reds fans, they think they know the story, and they don't. I promise you, they don't. You'll see the show and you'll go, oh, there's so much more to it. There's layers to it. There's the mafia involved. There's narcotics trafficking involved. There's a steroid scandal. There's an FBI investigation. There's blackmail involved. There's all this stuff that feels straight out of a Hollywood script. And then it's juxtaposed with the purity of baseball on top of it. So people are going to walk out of the theater saying to themselves, I thought I knew the story. I didn't know the story.
I mean, from what I know, and I'm not even aware of all these details, but just from what I know a fair amount. His trajectory is really unbelievable. I mean, he came from such humble beginnings, right? And then was not even physically was not that talented, wasn't that gifted in terms of like his size or speed or whatever. Literally rose and took one of the most, beloved records in the game and conquered it. And then the fall was just tremendous, So,
the rise was tremendous and the fall was just as tremendous.
Yeah.
The scouts said he can't run, he can't hit, he can't catch very well. But he has something that you can't teach. And the kid has more heart than you've ever seen anybody have. He has more hustle. He has just a work ethic that is unparalleled. He goes, he has everything that you can't teach, and he's lacking all the stuff that you can't teach. And they saw a spark in him despite his lack of like all-star ability, and then he became a 17-time all-star. So yeah, there's just something in him that is a rare breed that just baseball players just aren't built like that anymore. There's an interesting dichotomy of he played so hard, right? Like sacrificing his body, diving head first, lowering his shoulder into catchers. Like he gave up his body in any time he could, and yet he never got hurt. He never went on the disabled list.
Yeah.
In the 70s, he missed 10 games total. That's one game a year that he missed. And now, players
no one does that. Yeah.
Players go on the IL all the time now. They break a fingernail and they're out for 2 weeks or something. And now they have all these special safety things in the game, and the helmets and the gloves and everything. Pete just threw his body at the game, and then he probably broke every bone, and he just like, I don't care. I'm playing. Yeah. I'm playing tomorrow. I'm playing tomorrow. And tell me anyone today who plays like that,
Yeah. I mean, so they even have that load management today where they just give them days off because they don't want to wear them down too much.
Yeah. He's getting a regular day off. Do you think Pete ever wanted a regular day off? That's why he has all these records, because he never sat out. He played every game for like 20 some years.
Yeah. It's crazy. I'm a Phillies fan, obviously. And, I was just reading up on the 1980 World Series, which I was very young, but remember of course, remember one of his most iconic plays in that. But I was reading this article about after they won, and it said rather casually, just mentioned that he played 173 games that year. And I was like, that is just insane. These guys, nobody plays that much anymore.
Yeah, because that's 162 would be the season, and then the playoffs on top of that. Yeah, I mean, that's basically not missing a game all year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he refused to go out, and the managers never wanted him out because he was, so good. So it's just, he's a breed that just doesn't exist anymore. No one's going to even come close to his hit record because people don't play the number of years. They don't play the number of games in a year. They're hurt, whatever. They're for all the different reasons how the game has changed. His record will never be touched. I don't think,
I can't imagine it either. I mean, that is just such a tremendous number of hits. I mean, how many seasons did he play? 23 or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And he finished with 4256 hits. And now if any ball player gets 3,000, it's a gigantic moment. Like they stop the game and there's a ceremony, and he got 3,000th hit, and you're considered one of the all-time greatest hitters if you hit 3,000. And Pete was like 3,000, Yeah,
that's 3/4 of the way to where you need to get to catch him. Yeah,
exactly. No one even gets in the ballpark, no pun intended, of Pete's record. And that just shows you what how exemplary he was as a hitter, you know.
Now, so you grew up in Indiana, right?
Yes.
And so that not far from Cincinnati, I guess. So that I kind of just want to get from you what drew you to Pete Rose in the first place, and
Yeah.
like what captured your imagination about him. It sounds like from when you were very young. Is that right?
Yeah. So I grew up like it was like 2 hours from Cincinnati, but it was the closest baseball team to me, and it was the team that my dad and my grandpa and I just kind of grew up in a Reds household. We would go to the games pretty often in the summer, at least a few times a year. And when I was coming of age, Pete was in sort of the twilight of his career, but he was still playing, and just the lore of Pete was just everywhere. Just the Big Red Machine in the 70s. I didn't grow up with it. I was born in 77. Big Red Machine won in 75 and 76, but they were still kind of just a, they were just legends, right? You just hear about them all the time. My
Sure.
dad, my grandpa always talk about Big Red. And so Pete was just the centerpiece of that, of course. And then right when I became the age, I was like watching baseball games or collecting cards or playing Little League. Um, that's like 1985-ish. And like that's when he was going for the Ty Cobb's record, and it became just like front page news and the cover of Sports Illustrated, just the biggest thing. The whole country was tracking him that summer, chasing the record. I remember exactly where I was when he broke the record. So it's a combination of just, when I became old enough to realize what baseball was and start watching it, he was the centerpiece of my team. And I was on the Little League field, and I just like Pete, he was called Charlie Hustle for a reason, because he played so hard. He got the nickname because when he would get walked, he would sprint to first base, and no one ever did that. Whitey Ford from the Yankees walked him, and then he and Whitey and Mickey Mantle gave him the nickname of like
Right.
a Charlie Hustle.
And
And
they
they
were
did it.
mocking him, right?
They were mocking him. They did it kind of derisively, and then the next day's headline said Charlie Hustle beats Yanks, and then Pete liked it. Pete's like, great. You can make fun of me all you want. I love it. And that's kind of his attitude of like, you think you're getting under my skin? Fuck you. I'm
Yeah.
gonna take that and I'm gonna own it. You know? Uh,
That's such a brilliant way of just taking that and just making, it actually became his
yeah.
persona.
The persona, and there's nothing negative about it. You're hustling.
Yeah.
What's wrong with running to first base? So yeah, backfired on Whitey,
Yeah.
maybe.
You know what's
But
crazy about
yeah,
it too? Like it's like those were like baseball elite, right? Like Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford, they're legends of the game, right? And
yeah,
they're mocking this
yeah.
young up and comer, right?
Yeah,
And
little did they know. Yeah.
yeah, it's just this like sort of elitism that and Rose was just not elite ever. I don't think even to this day, even though he had such a storied career, he's not like part of the elite in this country. I feel like he still has those working class roots. He's never able to shake that, or I don't even know if he wanted to shake it.
Yeah, he's a total blue collar guy. Cincinnati's like the perfect town for him. It's such like a blue collar town. He was never into school much. Like, all he cared about
Yeah.
was getting on the baseball field. So, I'm sure his grammar is not the best, and he probably seems a little, uneducated, except when it comes to baseball. When it comes to baseball, he's the smartest guy to ever live. Um, but, but yeah, unrefined in the way that
Yeah.
maybe some other guys were, and just gritty and just plays gritty and has no interest in bourgeois stuff, and loves to hang with the people. Like he was a big person of the fans, just wanting to sign autographs, wanting to sit and talk. Up until the day he died, he loved one of his favorite things to do is just sitting and just talking to fans about baseball stories. And he would talk to you as long as you wanted to talk. And he was just a man of the people. He wasn't an elitist.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. So all of this though, like when you were young, sort of that approach to the game kind of just captured your imagination.
Yeah, and just he was a celebrity to me in the baseball world. I was collecting baseball cards, so it'd always be so exciting to open up a Pete Rose card. And there was just something about him that transcended the sport. He was just, I instantly put him on a pedestal of like this is how you play baseball.
Yeah.
You know, this is how, if you're not dirty, his dad used to tell him, if you're not dirty by the seventh inning stretch, you're not playing baseball. Like you slide, you dive, you sacrifice yourself, like you do anything to win, and I was only, 7 or 8 at the time, but I would do the 7 or 8 year old version of that on my field,
Yeah.
just saying like, what would Pete do? And it's the same attitude I carried to the show of like, I've been with the show for 11 years now, developing it. And I always just say, if I'm doing a show about Pete Rose, I need to have the same tenacity about it than he did with baseball. Like what would Pete do if he wrote a musical? He would never quit, right? Like he would keep going until you win. And so I'm just like to honor him. It's like I just don't give up on this thing,
Yeah. So I want to talk about this long road because you've been at it for a while, but really quick, you had brought up him breaking Ty Cobb's record, and I remember that too. I think that was an interesting point in time because you're I guess where you grew up was considered suburban Cincinnati, pretty much. So maybe like
no, it was in Indiana. It was a couple hours away, so we were closer to Indianapolis, but yeah.
But in terms of, so you were closer to, so you were probably watching Indianapolis TV stations, I would imagine.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Then maybe you had a similar experience to me, but I'm growing up in suburban Philadelphia, and I remember we were my family sitting at home. It was a September evening. We're watching TV, and they cut in to go to Pete Rose coming up to. They were doing that, with a couple of at bats. I think to when he tied the record, and then for when he broke the record. And so, like, we got to experience that.
And here comes the main attraction. And they're on their feet. Rose walking toward the plate. The most famous number 14 in the history of this game. And trying to make history right here in the first inning tonight. He levels the bat a couple of times. Shao kicks and he fires. Rose swings.
There it is! There it is! Get out! Get out! All right!
Hit number 4192. A line drive single into left center field. A clean base hit. And it is pandemonium here at Riverfront Stadium. The fireworks exploding overhead. The Cincinnati dugout has emptied. The applause continues unabated.
And then I think, Rose, he got the hit, the single to left center, and then they actually stopped the game, and Ronald Reagan called and congratulated him right on the field.
We have a gentleman waiting to talk to Pete Rose, who is a big fan of the city of Cincinnati, a big fan of the Cincinnati Reds ball club, and one of the biggest fans in this whole wide world of Peter Edward Rose. He is the President of the United States, calling from the White House, Mr. Ronald Reagan.
Hello?
Hello.
Pete Rose?
Yes, sir.
Alias Charlie Hustle?
Yes, sir.
This is Ronald Reagan.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Well, listen, I just wanted to say congratulations for breaking one of the most enduring records in sports history. Ty Cobb's career hit record of 4,191, and now, unless you've done something since I've heard the latest, you've made it 4,193. Well, I've been rooting for you, and come to think of it, I used to also root for the fellow who once held that record.
Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to call us, and we really appreciate it. And you missed a good ball game tonight.
I think it'll be a long time before someone is standing in the spot that you're standing in now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Well, I wish you, the Reds, and the people of Cincinnati all the best.
Well, if you'd have been here tonight, you'd know why we think this is the baseball capital of the world right here in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Well, I can hear that you've got a few friends there around you, and I won't keep you from them any longer, but again, congratulations, and you've really given a lift to the whole country.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Good night, and God bless you.
I know. They stopped the game for it was like a half an hour,
Yeah.
like it was the biggest celebration I've ever seen in sports. They brought a car out onto the field for him. His family came down. I mean, the other pitcher ended up just sitting down on the mound. He was tired, so he just sat down, and they just had this whole thing ready. Yeah, Reagan called him, and Pete's son came out, and it was just like baseball knew what a moment it was, right? Baseball didn't
Sure.
overlook this moment. They knew exactly that like this might never happen again, right?
Yeah.
This guy is special. We need to honor this moment and not rush it in any way. And they didn't. Steve Garvey was playing first base, and he was over there talking to Pete. They were longtime friends, and I can remember it so vividly, man, where I was.
So can I. And I also think too, just at that moment in time, like I feel like even when like Mark McGuire, let's say, broke Maris's home run record, I feel like the fanfare and just the way the country paused to observe the moment wasn't quite the same as that moment in time. Like just technologically, the way that the country was at that point, like television was the primary mode of communication. So it was just an interesting like moment in time that I guess we'll never quite see again. I just don't know. Even now, I don't know if the MLB, if it would be that big of a deal that the whole country would just stop what they're doing and they'd interrupt, regularly scheduled programming for it.
Yeah, probably not. Like, what is regular scheduled programming anymore? You know, it's not to be streaming Netflix and all of a sudden Netflix is going to cut into a baseball game. Yeah, it's like we'll never be in that moment again. And not to take anything away from McGuire, but like that was a single season record. So like technically any season that could have been broken, right? Like next season that record could be broken again now that it's Bond's record. But like Pete's was an all-time record, right? So, it takes an entire career to have a moment like that, as opposed to a single season record. But you're right. There's just the way our technology is now, we'll never have the cut in moment probably anymore.
Yeah. And culturally too, I feel like baseball is not quite what it was now, what it was then. Football has sort of, I don't know, surpassed it as the country's pastime. But
I guess the modern analogy to that would be you get an alert on your phone, that says like this thing's happening, and you look at your phone and then you can click a link and then it takes you to a screen. That would be the version.
Or you just swipe it away because you're doing something else. And
that's probably more of what it would be.
Yeah. All right. But let's talk about so you've been at this for so long, it sounds like for 10, 11 years now.
Which I hear is actually typical for like a first musical. A lot of musicals take forever, and especially your first musical. And it's gone through a lot of iterations. I was working actually with composers in LA, and we wrote the entire show. We had a whole score done. And we put up a staging one night in a theater in LA, and we had, what I thought we were on our way. And then the feedback that I kept getting from trusted sources was that the music was too much like Hamilton. And because that's what I was just kind of like listening to, and at the time, and it was very just what I like to write, the way I like to write. So, and the music was very sort of hip hoppy. And so from my agent and other people, they said, we can't move forward with this. Like, it's like Lin-Manuel Miranda has this market cornered. You don't want to be the guy who's trying to be Lin-Manuel Miranda, because you're never going to be that good. And so don't be the second guy, doing that. It just feels like an imitation. And so I had to make the very hard choice to throw away years of work.
Wow.
And so we had 18 songs. It was the entire show. And I had to have a hard talk with our composers and say, we have to reimagine this. And I needed to do it with different composers.
Really?
So one day I made a decision, and I threw away years of work. Every note that had been composed was gone.
Wow.
And I have copies of the songs, and I still really like the song. I think they're great. I love that version of it, but I understood why we needed to pivot. So my agent connected me with one of her clients, Neil Berg, whose two biggest loves in life besides his family are musical theater and baseball. He's a New York guy, diehard Yankee guy. And so she said, you have to meet with Neil. And so we had drinks and we hit off immediately, and he loved the project. And Neil is a lifetime New York composer. He always has a new show opening. He's a big, big, big deal. And so Big Deal Neil, that's what I should call him. Never called him that. I'm going to try to get that to stick. Big Deal Neil. And so Neil and I started working on reimagining the sound of the show. And we spent years rewriting the show from scratch. And then finally we had it completed. And so we've done 6 readings since then with like full casts, and you hone and this song is not necessary, but we're missing a song here. There should, you just are always finding the holes and cutting the fat and punching jokes and moving scenes around. It's a process. And so that's been many years. And then finally we decided that the show is ready. And so that's when we started theater submissions and, really getting it out there. And that's just a very recent thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So let me ask you though. So you said that the first iteration of it was sort of the music was kind of like hip hop flavored. So what is it now then? Like,
I would say it's a since the show takes place in the mid to late 80s, there's definitely influence of that you'll hear. So it's a hybrid of traditional musical theater meets 80s music. But the interesting little coda on that statement is that because it happened in the 80s, but it's still very much a modern story. We're still talking about it. Like I said, the last chapter perhaps isn't written yet, so it's still contemporary in kind of an interesting way. I wanted the music and the lyrics to sound like that as well, to invoke a sense of modernity. And so the lyrics do have a kind of modern sound, still in sort of that a lot of them are kind of up tempo, fast lyrics, a lot of rhyming, but it's kind of juxtaposed with musical theater sound and 80s sound.
Right. So it's sort of like a blend of time periods and genres.
It's a blend of 80s and today. Those are the two time periods that are in play for this piece, because the story takes place in the 80s, but it's still a modern story, a modern discussion, a modern debate. And I wanted the sound to invoke both of those time periods.
When you went back to the drawing board to rewrite the songs and whatnot, what was that like? What's your writing process? Do you sit down are you musical? I don't even know do you play an instrument? Do you sit down at a piano? Do you sit down with Neil and just like?
Yeah, I'm somewhat musical. I mean, I'm not musical like Neil is. Neil's a genius. I can hear it well. I can write it well. I can't necessarily play it well. I'm an intermediate piano player. At best, I'd say. But my process is, and probably every writer has a different process. I don't really know the right way to write a musical. I've never done it, so I just said what works for me in my brain, and I'll just go with that. My process is I like to write to music. A lot of composers like to take lyrics that the writers have written, like a poem, basically, and then write music to it. And I really can't do that. I can't write a poem without any kind of music in my head to write to. So what I typically do, this might be a completely strange process, I don't know, but I find a song, like a popular song, that has the feel that I want, the tempo, the overall kind of just vibe. And then I'll try to find an instrumental version of that song. And then I'll write the lyrics to that song. I'll write my own lyrics to that instrument.
To that arrangement.
Yeah. And then I'll give that to Neil. And then at that point, he'll throw away the old song that I used and completely reimagine it, but with the lyrics kind of already in place. And then usually when he's done his pass, then I need to do a second lyric pass to kind of like fine tune it into his music, So for example, that's a kind of a convoluted answer. So I'll give you an example to clear it up. So there's a song in the show called Rule 21, which Rule 21 in baseball is the rule that says you cannot gamble on baseball. So that's the big rule that Pete broke, Rule 21. And it's our act break song because like he gambles on baseball right when we cut to curtain, like the moment. So Rule 21, I knew the kind of vibe I wanted, a little bit dark, a little bit sinister, Pete's up to no good. And so there was just an Ed Sheeran song that I found that I liked called Don't. And I listening to it, I'm like, oh, that's got a cool little vibe. I could write to that. And so then I just found an instrumental version of Don't, wrote my lyrics to that, gave it all to Neil, and then he and I together kind of reimagined what the music would sound like.
That's such an interesting process. So you're really like kind of, you're writing over something else, giving it to him. He's just taking that away and doing his own
stripping it back down to just the words. But now I've got the words set the way I like it.
When you do this, I mean, he's on the West, he's on the East Coast. You're on the West Coast. So what are you sending him like digital files or something? How's that?
Lots of Zooms, Zooms and FaceTimes. I flew out there once and stayed at his house, and he has a big piano in his living room, and we did like 4 or 5 songs that weekend together. But we couldn't do the whole show in that timeline, so a lot of it was over Zoom. A lot of it was during the pandemic. We would meet every day during the pandemic on Zoom and fine tune these songs, and we'd go back and forth. He would do a pass, then I would do a lyric pass, and he would have another little idea, and so we would kind of bounce back and forth on things, or I would kind of sing a melody, a little bit of a melody to him, be like, I'm kind of hearing it like this, and I would do it the best that I could, and then he would emulate that on piano, and so it was very collaborative. He's a genius, but he's also very um, collaborative with me and kind of trusting. If I have an instinct on something, a melody or something, then he'll write right to that, and it's a really good relationship.
So you guys are mainly composing it on the piano, right? But then in the show, what instruments are going to be used? Is it a full orchestra?
Yeah. Yeah. So you write everything on piano. That's kind of the base for anything, because if you have that, then you can write all the other parts. And Neil will hear him in his head. He's like, oh, that's going to be a horn section right there, and this is going to be, we need high percussion here. But in his head, it's all just piano starting,
Right.
And then we give it to an arranger, a guy named Alex Wise, who's just another guy on our team. And so he takes Neil's piano and my lyrics, and then he does the full instrumentation. So he's the one who makes all of our demos, which are like the fully orchestrated demos. And he's a singer as well. So he does his voice as Pete, and he does kind of a lot of the parts. If we need a female, he'll bring in people, but he basically puts temp voices on the track and does all the horns and does all the strings. The strings get really beautiful. And then we'll work on that demo a lot, go back and forth with the demos, different rounds of notes, just like a script. It's just like you got notes on a script, and then you get another pass, another round of notes. And so we would work for a long time on all these demos to get them in a good place, because that's what you use to like submit the show to theaters. It's what you use to give the actors so they can learn the music. So the demos are very important. So Alex added all the different instrumentation, and then for our upcoming production, I don't know exactly all the pieces. I know it's going to be a band on stage. It's going to be guitar, piano, drums, and probably some horns. Yeah, and hopefully strings. Hopefully some strings too.
Wow.
I don't fully know that yet.
Yeah. I just love hearing about how that all works, the creative process. And like you said, I think for a lot of people, it works differently. But just curious to hear about how it works in this case. All right. So should we take a look at a clip from rehearsal? We have a short clip, like 30 seconds or so,
Yeah.
I guess. And this is pretty new, right? Because you guys just started rehearsing.
Yeah. And I'm not there yet. This is happening in Michigan right now, and I'm in LA. So I'm going to be, these are like early rehearsals. Like the cast has started learning things. I'm going to go out a little bit later when we get into tech rehearsals and for the performances. And I'll work with the actors a little bit on Zoom, I think. But so, yeah, you can roll the clip, but this is very early in rehearsals, just so everybody knows.
Okay, here it is.
Whack! It happens. I hear the crack of the bat, and all the fans start clapping. I smack a fastball to the left field gap, round first base straight to my cap, sky high. Tears rolling up in my eyes, fans yelling out so inside. In the sky, fireworks like the 4th of July. My whole man swelling with pride. I'm telling you, Ty. And what I'm now inclined to do is to remind you that I am redefining you. Cause there's a bright light now outshining you, named Pete, Mr. 4192.
Okay, so there it is. That is so a couple of things here to go back to. First of all, I assume you have a director then who's putting this whole thing together, right?
Oh yeah, Jen Little is the director, and she is the head of the theater department. So this production is being done by Oakland Community College in Michigan, and Jen Little runs the theater department there. It's outside of Detroit, called Farmington Hills, Michigan. And she and Neil go back a long ways. Jen was in New York for a long time and knows Neil and knows Neil's wife, who's a Broadway star. And so Neil just sent her the materials and said, you should really consider this. And Jen, read the script and decided to produce it. So she's the director. The clip we just saw is the one scene that does take place on a baseball field. That's Pete breaking Ty Cobb's record. The song is called Mr. 4192, which is the number of hits that he needed to break Ty's record. And it's fun. It's a baseball moment. We're cheering for him. We're clapping. We're watching baseball history right there in all a musicalized form.
Yeah. Now I was struck by a couple of things. First of all, the actor who's playing Pete Rose, he looks so young. He's very young, and I'm just like, oh man, I guess I'm getting old.
Yeah,
for one thing.
these are college. These are college kids.
These are college kids. Okay.
These are college kids, and they actually have cast two guys to play Pete, because
Right.
One guy will do half the performances, and the other guy will do the other half, because it is so much heavy lifting. And there are some days where there are 2 shows in a day, and I don't think the director wanted the actor to do 2 shows in a day. So they've split the part. It's just giving another student a chance to, be in the starring role. And it is just a lot of heavy lifting for a college kid. So
Sure. So it's a demanding part. But I was struck. I thought he looks very good. I mean, just in that short clip, I was like, wow, this kid's got it.
Yeah, even these kids are college kids, but they have great voices from what I've heard. I have not met any of them in person yet, but I know they're going to be a great cast, and I hear that they're fully engaged with the material and ready to give this thing the best performance it can be.
Yeah. So Charlie Hustle opens in November, right? When in November? Because I mean that's not far off from when we're recording.
Yeah, that's right. November 14th. Which I just realized that was Pete's number. How about that? 14. Yeah. Perfect. So that's opening night. I'll be there. I'll be doing a meet and greet before the show and a Q&A, an audience Q&A after the show on stage on opening night. So November 14th, and then the 15th, the 21st, the 22nd are the dates so far. They just added a matinee on, I think, the 15th. I think there's a double show on the 15th. But yeah, that's what we have so far.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, I mean, first of all, just break a leg with it. Good luck. Can you say good luck? Can I say good luck to you? You're not going on stage, right?
I think over Zoom, I think you're allowed to say good luck. I think that's the rule.
Okay. But after that, what happens next? Are you guys trying to get it elsewhere too? I mean, are we going to see the show in New York someday?
Oh man, that's the dream, right? That's the dream. So what happens next? We don't know exactly. We're in deep discussions now with 2 other theaters for 2025 productions, and nothing's concrete. I can't really talk about it officially, but it's looking likely. And those directors, I think, are going to go to the Detroit shows to check it out. But they seem like it's going to happen, I think. So a couple more coming up, and then we're always submitting. I mean, we literally just started the submission process. So the idea is that momentum breeds more momentum, and
right.
once you get it on its feet and people realize, oh, this is a real thing, especially with Pete being so newsworthy now, and he kind of never went away, as far as the story goes, but even more so now. We're really hoping that next year we'll get a lot of bites from theaters who want to put this on, and we're obviously targeting Cincinnati as a home. There are several great theaters there that we're pushing hard for, and then the ultimate dream would be New York, of course, but that's a long road, perhaps.
Sure. I mean, is it sort of a thing where if it gathers momentum and has good showings in Michigan where it is now and Cincinnati later, is that kind of what it takes to get it to Broadway? Or
that, and a lot of money. It takes producers, investors to get on board who see the potential in this. Right now we're at a point of just getting the word out, like this thing exists, and we're just kind of telling the world about it. And starting, no theater's too small for us. We'll go to high schools, we'll go to colleges, community theaters. It's just about getting it on its feet, which you continue to develop the show and just fine tune little things. So just any kind of little run would be a type of workshop for us. But just you can invite theater directors to other performances, and it's just about getting the word out and getting people excited about this and getting people talking about it, getting some articles written. An article came out today on BroadwayWorld.com about our show, and we did a Zoom with them and got some quotes and stuff. So that came out today. So hopefully that's the beginning of some press. I know that in Michigan they've invited all the kind of Detroit, news channels, and to come and cover it. So I don't quite know what the press will be, but just trying to get the word out. We might hire a press agent if we decide to do that to help us get the word out. But
yeah, no, it's great. And it's amazing what you've done in getting it this far too. And I know it's been a long road, so congrats on all of that.
Thanks. I'm ready to see it on its feet in front of an audience. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see this. Like we talked about, such a tremendous story, and then your imagination of it too. I bet it's cool.
Yes, I'm excited to see it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you know any theater people in New Jersey, help me connect.
Yeah, God, I don't really, but like, let me think about that because maybe I do.
Philly, Pete had several good years in Philly and helped bring the series to Philly, and even just friends of friends of friends. Just, it's all just kind of a grassroots effort right now of who knows someone who runs a small theater. Anything like that will help the cause. So
absolutely. Let me think about that. I might actually know some people in my hometown. People who know people, who do like a small community theater type of thing. But let me think about it because I just haven't thought about that in decades, probably.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about Pete, though, too. Do you have favorite highlights of his or moments of his? I imagine you must. I know I do as a big time baseball fan and as a Phillies fan.
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously breaking Ty Cobb's record is the one that I probably remember the most of just watching, making it an iconic moment. But, he's very famous for a particular play in an All-Star game.
Yes.
You know what I'm about to say?
I know exactly the one, 1970, right?
70. So it predated me, but I've obviously seen it many times and heard about it. And to me, there's nothing that kind of symbolizes Pete more than that moment. And I'll explain for your listeners. It's the All-Star game, which is considered an exhibition game. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It's just for the fans and it's for the best players to play against each other for fun, really. And he's on second base with the game on the line, and the hitter hits a single up the middle, and Pete's rounding third, and he's coming home, and the throw is coming home, and again, the game means nothing except to anybody except for Pete, because every game means everything to Pete. So Pete lowers his shoulder and takes out Ray Fosse, the catcher, with his shoulder, and Ray Fosse drops the ball, and so Pete is safe. The National League wins the game. It's a game-ending moment, and Ray Fosse was never the same after that. He dislocated his shoulder.
I think he broke his shoulder too, right? I think it was like a fracture. Yeah,
he had surgery to repair it, but he said he was never the same after that moment. And that was such a polarizing moment for Pete because a lot of people said, oh, it was so uncalled for to hurt somebody in a game that doesn't mean anything. And all Pete said was, all I cared about in that second was winning the game. He's like, I'll do it by any means necessary. It wasn't against the rules. It was just a hard-nosed play, and nothing typifies Pete probably more than that moment.
I think if I remember correctly, I saw a quote where he said something like, "It doesn't turn into girls softball between third base and home plate," or something like that.
Yeah. He never was shy of putting some words together that were both funny and
I think that was also like 30, 40 years ago that he said it too, when he was being criticized at the time. But
of course, yeah. And then there's the famous catches of Philly, that the foul ball down the first baseline.
Yeah. That is that is probably the thing, even more than the broken record, breaking Ty Cobb's record. That is the thing that I associate most with Pete Rose because it was such a clutch play and also personified like that hustle. Like he did not need to be over there. You think Bob Boone is like a very good catcher, is not going to have a problem catching that ball. And he was right there to save that play. And the bases were loaded at the time in that game.
Yeah, it was a World Series game. Bases
6.
were loaded. It was the 9th inning.
Yes.
And, Pete, you're not going to give up on any play if you're Pete Rose, You fight until the very end, or like the end of a play, the end of a game. If the play is in play, you're locked in, right? And you're saying, what can I do to help us win this play? And for your listeners who don't know what we're talking about, pop up Bob Boone is the catcher. He runs over. Pete's the first baseman. He runs over. It's a foul ball. Looks like Boone has it in his glove, and it pops out of his glove. And then Pete has the presence of mind to quickly snatch it out of the air. And this is World Series game, I think it's game 1, maybe?
No, it's game 6, and it was
game 6. Okay, World Series
second
game
out
6.
in the ninth inning.
Ninth inning, second out. I mean, just a total game changer.
Yeah.
And again, just personified Pete. He's just in the right place at the right time. It's a hustle play. It's a presence of mind play. It's a winner's play.
It's popped up. Boone, Rose, they'll have a play. Boone dropped it and Rose caught it. Rose was right there. It popped out of his glove and Rose made the play. Give me an idea as we look at Boone approaching the dugout. He picks it up. How much Pete Rose hustled. He came over to help out if he needed the help.
And that's one that you see replayed all the time for him. And trying to think if there are any others. I'll come back to it if something pops in my head. I mean, there's so many. There are millions.
Yeah.
He played 7 different positions. He was an all-star at 7 different positions.
Right? Isn't that crazy? Nobody does that anymore. Nobody is that versatile.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yes, the Phillies one, and I'll actually put these clips in so people can see them. See what we're
cool,
because they are great plays. But the 80 World Series one is just so amazing because the hitter was Frank White, who's a good hitter, and he hit that foul ball. And if you give a good hitter a second chance, sometimes they make you pay, and that could turn the whole World Series. And literally, that was the second out of the inning, and then the final out was the next hitter, and the Phillies won. That was their franchise's first World Series. I was 4 at the time. I remember it because my parents were going nuts. It was,
It's very, very possible to say that if Pete doesn't make that play, the Phillies don't win the World Series. I mean, we don't know for sure, but it's very likely.
Yeah, especially given their history of futility leading up in 100 years before that.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you one more question about Pete Rose, and I think this is the question that everybody's asking these days. Should Pete Rose have been put into the Hall of Fame before he died, and should he be put in after?
I mean, I'm trying to take my bias out of it. Obviously, I'm a diehard Reds fan. I'm a Pete Rose fan, but I'm also a student of him as I did all the research for this and kind of know, most of the story. And I think resoundingly yes, both before and now after. For me, it's just about the double standard of, what's the criteria for Cooperstown, right? What has it always been? What are the other players held to? And Cooperstown is filled with guys who aren't saints. Ty Cobb is at the top of that list.
Yeah.
People have checkered past right and left in Cooperstown. And, what Pete did was, I'm not going to say it wasn't wrong, but he bet on himself to win the game. There's 1,100 pages of evidence in the Dowd report, and not a shred of it suggests that he did not bet on himself to win. There are hundreds of betting sheets that are actual betting sheets of his. None of them have the Reds to lose. So, plus it's just not Pete's DNA. He doesn't bet on himself to lose. It's just not who he is. So is betting on yourself the ultimate crime in baseball when nowadays there are betting kiosks at stadiums? You go and you buy your hot dog, and right next to it, you place your bet. I think there are 17 of the 30 stadiums this year have betting kiosks in the stadium. There are FanDuel logos mowed into the grass.
Yeah.
So, baseball and gambling used to be, gambling used to be the biggest taboo in baseball. There's the Mickey Mantle and Hank Aaron were once fined an incredible amount of money because they were signing autographs in a casino. They weren't even gambling.
Right.
They were.
It was the ultimate separation of church and state, right?
Baseball wanted zero to do with gambling. They didn't even want Mickey Mantle sitting in a casino signing autographs because it blurred the line of, we're mixing this and that. And now that line is so blurred between baseball and gambling. Now every team has to submit their lineup 15 minutes before the start of the game. And the reason for that is that baseball now submits that lineup to Vegas,
Yeah.
all different sites. And they are completely bedfellows now in an unapologetic way. They advertise it. You see FanDuel and DraftKings logos everywhere. So I'm not saying what Pete did was wrong, but times have changed. The relationship between baseball and gambling has changed. He never fixed games or cheated in games. He bet on himself to win. He's one of the greatest of all time. To me, it's a no-brainer that Pete deserves to be in the Hall of Fame when you look at all that in totality.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ryan. I think that whatever, Bart Giamatti was the commissioner who banned him for life, and whatever happened at that moment, that may have been at the time what needed to happen. But I feel like he deserves some clemency at some point, as the culture changed, as the sport changed, like you're talking about. But to just keep the ultimate hitter out of the Baseball Hall of Fame, out of the game altogether, honestly, he should have been reinstated to allow him some chance to work within the game, I think.
Yeah. I mean, he's been banished now for 35 years. There's a line in my show where he says there are murderers who serve shorter terms than this.
Yep.
It's like, he admits what he did was wrong, but he goes, am I the ultimate pariah? Like, does the punishment fit the crime? I didn't use steroids. I didn't do anything that gave me an unfair advantage. I didn't steal signals that let the Astros win a World Series. I didn't inject anything that allows me to hit home runs. So, like, in light of what people do today and the punishment that they get, if you get tested positive for steroids, you get a 50-game suspension. If you steal signs, apparently you get nothing because those Astros got nothing.
Yeah.
It helped them win a World Series. And Pete's like, I bet on myself to win, man.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, and I'm not excusing it at all and not approving of it, but he was that competitive, he was like that competitive and I guess believed in himself that much. It's interesting. Yeah. I don't know if you saw Bob Costas, who I guess Bob Costas, obviously a, iconic announcer, has been calling baseball games for decades. He's sort of the elder statesman of like baseball at this point, at least from the media perspective. He had some interesting thoughts too. I don't know if you saw them. He was pointing out, Rose's flaws, but at the same time was like, it's basically just cruel to keep him out of the game for as long as they did and keep him out of the hall while he was alive.
What would be your perspective on the possibility of Rose going into the Hall of Fame posthumously?
Well, the Hall of Fame would have to change its rule, which was an ex post facto rule, to be honest, put in 1991, and obviously not aimed at Shoeless Joe Jackson, who, as Casey Stengel once put it, is dead and remains dead at the present time. He had died like in 1950 or 1951. So 1991 is exactly when Pete Rose would have become eligible, right on the cusp of being eligible, retired as a player for 5 years, last played in 1986. Right on the cusp of his being eligible, they put that in. It was obviously aimed at Pete Rose. And from that day forward and to today, my position and the position of millions of others is, yeah, we get it. He broke the cardinal rule. He should be banned from baseball under that rule for life. But somebody got those 4,256 base hits and those 3 batting championships. Put him in the Hall of Fame, put it at the bottom of his plaque, banned from baseball, 1989 for life. It's part of the record. But he should be in as a player. And as you know, Greeny, if you have a slow day on a talk show and you just say, hey, folks, should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame? The phones light up. All those decades after he last played, he remains a central figure in the minds of baseball fans, including baseball fans who never saw him play.
Absolutely right. And evidence of that was on display yesterday with all of the attention that it got. Bob, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing. I know you just flew in from California last night. You'll be doing the baseball games this weekend. Thank you for getting up early this morning and sharing some perspective.
Thank you, Green. If you have 10 seconds here, justice is one thing. Justice can be tempered by mercy. No one is nominating, even in death, Pete Rose for Citizen of the Year. But it's cruel and unusual punishment that the game he loved and the game he gave so much to and is so much a part of its history turned its back on him in the case of the Hall of Fame. He's represented in the museum itself, but not in the plaque gallery. I went into the Hall of Fame with him once, and he stood in front of Ty Cobb's plaque, and I backed away because he was looking at that plaque in awe and thinking, he wasn't a reflective man, that's for sure, but thinking in that moment, I'm linked in history with Ty Cobb. Why am I not here? Now, part of the answer is by your own doing, Pete. But other people could have undone that part of it by tempering justice with mercy in his case. And now, if someday he gets in, if someday they relax the rule and he gets in, it seems almost just as cruel because he can't smell the roses, no pun intended.
Yeah, I mean, they've taken a lot of fan polls, and overwhelmingly, fans want Pete in the Hall. Not everyone, but it's not like a 50-50. It's more like a 70-30 situation. Right. And same with former players. And I mean, my thought is put him on the ballot, and if the sports writers vote him in, great. If they don't, great. But at least give him a chance.
Yeah, I think
let the people decide instead of just one commissioner of baseball decide.
Yeah, I think at this point too, that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's switch gears, shall we?
Yeah.
We started this show talking about how I didn't know what you've been up to, and my God, you're up. This is not Charlie Hustle is not the only amazing thing you got going on right now. You're doing something called Survivor in a Day. And explain what this is, because I'm not even totally sure. It looks almost to me like it's like backyard Survivor. Maybe is it for like corporate events or something?
Yes, I have Charlie Hustle, and I have my side hustle, which is called Survivor in a Day. I mean, you basically got it right. It's we started a few years ago. I created this thing, and I'm just a fan of the show, and I think I'm a fan of games, and I think it's like the ultimate game. Like it just combines everything that I love in games and puts them all together. And so I've been a big fan of watching the show. I put in my audition tapes to get on, et cetera, et cetera. I never heard anything. So at one point I thought, well, the next best thing is I'm just going to make my own and play it with friends. And it started as just that. It was like, I'm going to make one game, Survivor in the backyard. We have a backyard. It's big enough to have like games and stuff. And I said, I'm just going to invite my friends. And we're going to play for Survivor, and we're going to do it all in one day. We're going to play a whole season in one day. We're going to start early, player arrivals like 7:30, and then we're going to go to whenever we're done. And we're usually done around midnight. And I said, I just want to make this like really fun game where adults get to be kids for a whole day. And so I put it on, and this was a few years ago, and it was just like a big success, I guess. And so then other people wanted to play. I want to play. When are you doing it again? I want to play. And word just kind of got out. And so I thought, well, I wasn't really planning on doing it more than once. It was just kind of a thing that I was going to do. And then I was like, well, I guess we could call it a season 2. And I wasn't even calling the first one season 1 because I didn't know there'd be more. In fact, I called the first one Survivor Tarzana, which is where I live, part of LA I live in. And then after that, it was always a different country. Survivor Zimbabwe was season 2, and every time is a different one, and we incorporate the culture into it a little bit. So I just kind of started, and we did a season 2, and then started building my producing team, and we started getting a little more sophisticated. We hired a camera crew, and challenges became bigger and sort of more professional, and then it's just kind of grown to become this thing. Next Saturday we have our 5th season. It's called Survivor Sri Lanka, and Survivor Sri Lanka is all stars. So it's our first ever game where it's all returning people. It's all like our 20 best players who we've had before coming back to play again, which will be very epic. And we decided to kick it up a notch, so we made it a 2-day game.
Wow! So
they will all be sleeping in the backyard, Survivor style, and then we'll wake up the next day and finish the game and crown a winner. Wow. But it's a crazy thing, and it keeps getting crazier every year. We keep trying to outdo ourselves, but basically you pay to play. It's a small donation that covers all your food for the day and all the games and stuff. And then we play for $1,000, the winner, and then second and third place get a little money too. And approximately there's an elimination every hour. We do a challenge and a tribal council roughly every hour.
Wow. So you're having like what, 12, 13 tribal councils in that one day?
Something like that, maybe more like 15, but yeah.
15, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. We're voting people out. You get assigned to a tribe, that's like your team. You're battling the other team in these challenges. If you lose the challenge, you go to tribal and vote somebody out. And then there are a lot of little twists and turns along the way to keep everybody kind of on their toes. At every game, we design a different game. We take inspiration from the show and say, what are some twists and turns that they threw in and what can we do? And then we've kind of dipped our toe into some of the like corporate team building stuff, because not everybody wants a vote out game. Like we've done birthday parties and we've done team building exercises. We've had high school sports teams here doing like team morale building things. So we don't vote people out. We just do challenges and make it a fun way where everyone stays engaged the whole time. We just came back last weekend from Lake Tahoe and we did a big game up there for corporates, and corporate. It was not a vote out game. We just partnered with Ethan Zahn. Ethan was the winner of Survivor Africa, which is season 3.
Okay, yeah, I saw that on your Instagram. Yeah. So what are you doing there?
He's played Survivor 3 times, and he's a legend. He's won the game. He's also a 2-time cancer survivor, so he's just a very interesting guy and a great speaker. So we partnered with Ethan, and now he's not in all of our games because he lives in Florida, but he flies out and we do stuff together, and we're working on some really cool projects with him upcoming that I don't think I can speak to yet, but some big stuff's happening for us now that we have Ethan on board.
Hey, I'm Ethan Zahn, winner of Survivor Africa, and I just played Survivor in a day, and it was spectacular. We had mental challenges, physical challenge, social challenges. I have yet to play a game of Survivor where I actually felt like I was out there on the island playing. I played the real game of Survivor 3 times. I won once, I lost twice, and I was so close this time in Survivor in a day, made it to the final 4, and I got backstabbed, and I'm pissed, which means I gotta come back, and I gotta play again.
And then we continue to do our home games here. So it's just for fun, really. But now that we've turned it into a business, we are getting hired. Like our home games are for fun, and then in between that, we do the private events. So if you want a game for your friends, you can book us to do like a private game, or for your coworkers or something like that, and we put together like a really fun game for you.
That's such a great idea, Ryan. And you're hosting it, right? You're the host of this, so you're like the Jeff Probst.
I'm the host of it. Yeah, we have full day games, and then we have like half day games. A lot of the team building stuff, the corporation stuff, are more into the half day games. We use our pool. We have like underwater challenges and underwater cameras and things. Not so much for the corporate stuff because they don't. We're not going to do like bathing suits for the team building stuff. But for our private games, we use the pools. We use everything and just try to outdo ourselves every season. It's turned into kind of a cool thing. We have an Instagram. A couple of our trailers are on there. You can see a lot of photos and some video there. You can kind of check it out. And we're making it as legit. We like to think it's the next best thing to being on the show,
Yeah. I mean, I bet there's a lot of people out there who, like yourself, have applied numerous times and just can't get on. This might be a good way to get their fix, right?
Yeah. Or either get their fix or see if they
test or like get some practice.
See if they have what it takes, or like test themselves, or very least just have a fun day away from their kids.
So how does somebody like, let's say I want, because I was like, I want to play this game. I told you in an email, I'm like, I want to play. I want to
Yeah.
get on this. How do I play in your backyard? How do I do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So the game next week is All Stars. So that's cast already, and that's kind of set in stone. And then our next game, so we do a game in the spring and a game in the fall. So usually May and October are like our game months. So our next game for new players would be next May, and that'll be our first season where we're actually going to do audition tapes.
Oh, wow.
We've never done that before because it's always just been friends of friends of friends, and like, players for the next season will say, "Oh, I've got a friend who would love to play next time." And so it's all just kind of been a word of mouth thing. But now that we've started the Instagram and we have a pretty good following on Instagram of people I don't even know, we're going to just put out a regular casting call and do auditions. But that said, if you want to play, I know someone. I can make sure the tape gets seen.
All right, yeah, let them know I might want to play.
Yeah, you'd have to come to California though.
But for other people, they can send in a casting tape, right? Next year.
Yeah.
How in advance are you going to put that casting call out?
I don't know yet. We're not there yet. Right now, our eyes are focused on our game next Saturday.
Yeah.
And it's a ton of work. It's a ton of detail work. So we're really focused on that right now. We want it to go as smoothly as it can. It'll be our biggest game we've ever done. So it's just a lot of moving parts. So we're not even really thinking about the next season yet. So probably towards the end of the year or maybe even like January, we'll start posting about looking for new people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Such a cool idea.
Yeah. And then anyone can play who wants to book us for a private thing.
Yeah, that's a very cool thing too. Yeah, congrats on all of that. So such an interesting stuff you're talking about here today, Ryan. And you and I met, didn't know each other that well, but met you in the Page program way back, like we said, more than 20 years ago, almost 25 years ago now at this point, which is unbelievable, in New York City. So you ended up there like so many others. What made you want to get into the Page program?
Oh gosh. So I went out to New York to visit my friend, and all I cared about in the whole world at that time was Saturday Night Live. Like more than my family, more than anybody. Like SNL was like pinnacle of coolness and success and everything. And I just wanted I was like, how do you write? I just want to be a writer for the show. That's all I cared about. So I went to New York with my friend, and we took the NBC tour because I knew that you got to see the SNL set. And I just thought, I just want to be in the presence of it just for like a few minutes. I just want to sit there. So we took the tour that you and I are very familiar with now, that I ended up leading the tour 100 times
Ended up
later.
giving probably hundreds of those tours.
Yeah. But at the time, I didn't know that. And I thought, well, I'm just going to take this tour because I'll get to see and just smell the air. And it was a show week. And so there was a lot going on. You could see him rehearsing down there. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I was still living in Indiana. So this was just the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And then I saw these people who were giving the tours, and they looked like me. They were my age. And I just said, who are you? Like, what is this? Like, how do you do this? And they said, oh, I'm at NBC Page. I don't think I'd even heard of the term. They said it's the Page program. And I got so intrigued I thought, oh my God, what is the Page program? You get to be an SNL every day. And so I just started looking it up online. There was a little bit you could find online. And I just graduated from college. And so I applied. And actually, I would like to tell you this story. I need to plug in my computer.
Yeah. You want to pause for a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah. So plug in and
yeah. And I'm going to need to be inside for the rest of it. So I sent it. So I was just like, when I get focused on something, as you can tell, like I just go all in and I can't not think about it every second of my day. So all I thought about was the Page program. How do I get into the Page program? It's all I cared about. That's going to be my ticket. And I was a kid who in college, like I changed my major a bunch. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was just, I was kind of floating around all over the place. And then as soon as I saw the Page program, I just got like locked in. Like I got to figure out how to make that part of my life. So I went home, I looked it up. There was a little link to click to send in your resume or whatever. So I sent in my resume, and I remember the moment I hit return to send it, and I hit it. And I thought, that's not going to do the job. I said, that's not the effort that I'm going to put into this. They're going to get a million of these resumes, and I'm just going to be in a pile. And I said, if I want this, I gotta figure this out. So the short version is I I flew to New York from Indiana. My strategy, which was very thin and stupid, but my strategy was to go to 30 Rock, find a page walking around the lobby, and see if I could talk to a supervisor. And so I did that. I walked around 30 Rock. I saw a couple of pages, most of the whom were kind of blowing me off. They're just like, oh, we don't really do that. And, but I didn't give up, just like Pete Rose. And then finally, I talked to some other pages just walking around, and I said, is there any way that I can hand in my resume in person to your supervisor? And they said, sure, let me go upstairs and I'll see if he's available. So they went up and they talked to the GR. You remember that term, the GR?
Of course, yeah.
And the GR at the time was Mark Montgomery.
Oh my God! Wow.
Remember Mark Montgomery?
Of course, yeah.
So Mark Montgomery came down the elevator bank there on the west side, and I handed him my resume. And at the time, I thought he like ran the Page program. I didn't realize he was an actual Page.
Yeah.
Because he was not in Page uniform, and he seemed like a boss. And little did I know that he was just a Page. But anyway, and I handed him my resume, and I said, I just wanted to turn this in, and I just really wanted to be a Page. And so our conversation was about 10 seconds long. He took it and he goes, okay, man, thanks. I'll turn it in or whatever he said. And then he turned around and we said goodbye. And the whole thing was like 10 seconds. And then I got on a plane and I flew back to Indiana. But it was and then he set it on the desk of the right person, and Jackson, I guess. And then I got a call for an interview. But I wholeheartedly believe that it was just because I turned it in a hard copy and not just relied on the online submission. And it was just, to me, that symbolized me of just like, okay, if you want something, you got to go get it. You got to like be bold and break down doors and.
Yeah, that's a great story. Now, when you finally got into the Page program, did you go and like talk to Mark? Did he remember that?
Oh, of course. I've talked to him many times, and like Mark and I are friends. We did the sketch group together, Next Monday it was called, right, when we were Pages. So we worked, we did a lot of stage shows together, and we did stand up together. So Mark, yeah, I told him many times that he is probably the reason why I got that first interview. He as a GR, he could have said he was busy. He could have just said no, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a miracle, even if his intentions are totally good there to like get it in. Like, you remember how sort of chaotic it was back there?
Oh, just stacked the paper everywhere.
Papers all over the place. Like that thing your resume could just get knocked off a thing and be into the void.
The other thing I didn't realize at the time, and I learned it later, because later I became a manager of the Page program. I had the scheduler job, and I ended up being on the receiving end of all these like resumes. I would look through resumes, I would do interviews all the time. But at the time, I didn't realize just how many people submitted their resume to this thing.
Oh my God.
I knew it was a lot, because I had to think, well, I'm coming from Indiana, which means people are going to be coming over from all different states. And it's such a cool job that I can't imagine that there's anyone who doesn't want the job. And so I knew there's a lot of people, but then once I got behind the scenes as a manager and I saw that they get literally 100 a day and they hire about 100 a year, I thought, Jesus, like, how did I ever get this job? Like it just baffles me. How did any of us? I mean, we defied odds that we didn't realize the odds.
I don't know if you saw that it's actually harder to get into the Page program than it is to get into Harvard.
Statistically, I've heard that based on just the number of applicants and number of admissions. Yeah.
Yeah. And same with me. It's like, if you're lucky enough to get that first interview, then you got to get past that. And for me, that was with Dan Jackson. I think it was probably with you as well. And then you go to that panel interview. Do you remember the panel interview?
Oh, of course. Yeah. My first one was with Jim Ferrazzi, and my panel was the next day.
Oh, wow. Mine was like 2 months later.
Yeah. Most people waited months, and I flew in. I think they had a cancellation because I flew in for my first interview with Ferrazzi, and I think they had someone drop out for the next day for the panel, and they said, hey, since you're in town already, do you want to just come back tomorrow? And I was just like, absolutely. So my interviews were back to back, and I never heard of anyone who had a situation like that. I think I just got super lucky, and then did the panel, and it's probably better that I didn't have months to like get nervous about it.
Over it. Yeah,
agonize over. I was like, even if it's a no, I just want the no to happen sooner rather than later,
Yeah. So what I remember about mine is there was 8 of us on one side of the table, right? You're in like a conference room, and there was 8 of us, and then there was maybe 8 people. I don't even remember. Some almost similar number of people on the other side of the table, right? Mm-hmm. And the eight of us were there, and then I remember four of us actually got the, like 3 months later, four of us got the job. And I had six people start in my page, in my page group, and two others from who were in different panels. But it was just interesting to see that. It's like, it's almost like Survivor in a way, like you go into this thing and it's like, you don't know if you're coming out of it alive or what.
I know if the person next to you gives a really great answer, then you're like, fuck, like I got this guy. And like, you don't know how many there could be taking out of the groups. You're like, is it one out of us who get it? Are we all getting it? Could they hire zero of us? So you don't really know if you've got competition around you, but you know that you're, even subconsciously they're comparing you to the other people. If you give a terrible answer, you could give one terrible answer just because of nerves, and that could define your outcome.
Yeah, that could sink you. What's also crazy, and you can speak to this better than I can, but I always thought too, like the Page program, people were always coming in and out, and there was no regularity with when people left. Some people come in for 2-3 months, and then they'd go, creating space. You know what I mean? So like if that happened, like that could affect your success in a panel interview. Just like who just left, or did no one just leave?
Yeah, almost like a baseball team, like. I'm great at first base, but this team does not need a first baseman.
Right.
A lot of it comes down to the needs of the hirer and the timing that you happen to be there at the time that they need you.
Right.
I think now they've changed. I think now they require you to have the full year. I don't think they allow people to leave early.
Is that right? Yeah. That makes sense. But I remember people would be in and out of there 3 months, and because they found a job, which is what the whole point of, getting in there in the first place.
I know. I never envied those people though, because I was always just thinking, man, this is the greatest job I've ever had. I don't want it to end. Like, it'll end in a year, so it's going to end soon enough. But like, I want to enjoy this with all these people. It felt like the next year of college. It felt like a combination of real world and college, where you're just with all these cool young people.
Yeah, I always felt the same way. I thought it was like a fraternity and a sorority combined.
Yeah.
And like you're going out, you're working a lot, 6 days a week and everything, but you're going out and you're like having fun with people, and it was great.
You're working on shows, you get to, SNL or other shows. I'm like, what other job am I going to go to after this? That's going to be this. I was like, I'm going to do this forever.
Now, all right, let's talk about, you were a Page, you did the whole year then, right? You did the full tour. Yeah. So what was your, like, do you have like a big memory that sticks out in your mind? Like something crazy that happened? I mean, people that I've talked to on this podcast have had some wild stuff that they've told me. I think Betsy Van Stone has probably the most amazing story of all, which actually happened after she was in the program, but because she was in the program,
Remind me, give me the quick headline. What was her story?
So Betsy went and ended up being George Wendt's date for the NBC 50th anniversary show, if you remember that. So she sat with the cast of Cheers. She's like in there sitting with, like, right next to George Wendt with the cast of Cheers, right behind the cast of Friends.
Oh, she was a seat filler, and then they stayed on her the whole time.
Well, she wasn't really a seat filler. Apparently, I guess she was a seat filler technically, but I guess like George Wendt's date at the last minute decided not to come, so they couldn't have that empty seat. They put her in it, and she's sitting there. And those were some iconic NBC shows. So every commercial break that they were going to, like the camera's panning, to there. And then when they're singing, they sang the Cheers song. She's singing the Cheers song with George Wendt. It's a wild thing.
So that would have been the 75th anniversary, not the
75th. Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
75th. I mean, it's hard to top that story. I don't have.
You don't have to top it, but just that an example.
Yeah.
Of like,
well, so I was fortunate enough. God, I just was on a lucky streak, man. So not only did I get the job, but then as soon as I got the job, then I set my sights on the SNL assignment, because that's like all I wanted. But that's like the most coveted assignment. Everybody wants the SNL desk because you get to work down on the cast and stuff. And so I got that assignment. I was very, very lucky, and I don't even know how that happened, but I got the desk. So it would have been the fall of 2000. My first show was when Will Ferrell said strategery. If you remember,
yeah.
Remember the sketch as George W. Bush. So it was an election year, and Gore Bush and all the controversy that came with that, and it was Tina Fey's first show as a cast member, and so I was there just at a heyday. I felt, Will Ferrell was the centerpiece of the cast, and Jimmy and Maya and Tracy Morgan and Tina Fey, and it was just a really awesome time. And so I have a ton of memories just sitting at that Page desk. I remember and again, keep in mind, like SNL is my favorite thing in the world at this point, and I'm just moved from a cornfield to New York City, and so just imagine just the giddiness that you feel inside, but yet you're trying to be cool and not seem like it. And I just remember seeing Lorne Michaels for the first time and just like that first day of being at the desk is when you see everyone for the first time. And I remember when the first time I met Will Ferrell, he got off the elevators and he was walking down the 8th floor and he was shooting Zoolander at the time. So he had like bright, blonde hair. I don't know if you remember his Zoolander look, but that's what he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, like bleach blonde hair. And so he was walking in the hallway and I was eating a little plate of potato chips, and all I was thinking is, oh my God, there's Will Ferrell, there's Will Ferrell, there's Will Ferrell, and be cool, be cool, be cool. And he comes up to me, and we've never met. He's deadpan, classic Will deadpan, and he says, you shouldn't eat those chips; those are bad for you. And I said, you're right, Will, you're right. And then he takes the plate from me, and he just starts eating them as he walks away. And that was my introduction. I'm like, he just did a bit with me. Like I was part of a Will Ferrell bit, and he took my chips and he never came back and gave them away. And I thought that was the funniest thing.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are so many little moments. I mean, I got to write jokes for updates. I just remember like the first time I got a joke on was just, euphoria out my ears.
I imagine, right? Christian Blatt talked with me about that and just getting the joke on and how satisfying that was. Do you remember what the joke was?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember it word for word. Sure. So I'd submitted for like a year. I don't know. I got on this list where you get to send update jokes in if you work on the show.
Yeah.
So you work for a long time and you submit every week, and usually there's nothing. So they have great writers there, and Tina was writing so much of her own jokes at the time, so almost impossible to get a joke like throwing over the fence like we were doing. But so I got a joke, and as soon as I wrote it, I knew this was the one. I was like, this is gonna be the first joke I get on. I know it, and then it was. So the news story was that John Travolta, who's also a pilot, he purchased a bomb sniffing dog to feel safer on the plane. It was like right after 9/11. So he like purchased a bomb sniffing dog to feel safer on his private jet. Unfortunately for the actor, the dog came 6 movies too late.
That's a great joke.
Yeah. And like when I wrote it, it was tight. There were no extra words in there. I'm like, that's just a good rhythm. I'm like, it just checks all the boxes. I'm like, that feels right. It's a good joke. So I submitted it, and then you don't know if you get something on until you're watching the show. And so, you see the graphic come up over Tina's shoulder of John Travolta, and I go, okay. But they could have gone with somebody else's joke, so you don't really know it yet. And then she says it, and then I just kind of like, I think I needed a new pair of underwear. I think I just.
That's awesome. So Tina delivered the joke, and yeah, right. You're sitting there in suspense. Like it's not until the punchline, really, right?
Yeah. Tina delivered it. It was a flawless delivery. And it got 2 waves of laughter. They got like the initial wave, and then it started to die down, and then she kind of held it, like she didn't go to the next joke, and then this other wave of it was like a big moment. It was a big joke, and Entertainment Weekly printed it that week.
Wow, that's great.
It was the first time I'd ever been paid to write a joke or write comedy.
Yeah. Now,
so
what did you get back in those days? Wasn't it like $150 or something?
$100.
$100 for a joke. Yeah.
And Tina was the head writer, and so like she signs the check. So I still have a copy of the check framed upstairs in my office of like the first thing I ever sold, signed by Tina Fey, and $100, and it was just so exciting. And then after that, I started getting jokes on, fairly regularly every show.
Now, do you have the video of that like somewhere? You must have that saved on your phone or something, right?
I do have it somewhere. Yeah, I've got it. I got it off of a Peacock or something. Swing and grab. So I've got the video, and I got the cue cards.
Awesome.
I would go, after the show, I'd go down, and like when everyone was at the party, I'd go down and grab cue cards of my joke and take them home.
Yeah, that's a great story. That's a really good one. I mean, I'm amazed. I'm always amazed at the stuff that everyone has a different experience, right? In that job. And I think some people have better experiences than others. Some people get maybe assignments that are not as fun as the 8H desk. but I'm just always amazed at what was going on in that building. There's so many different things happening with so many different people, and it's great to hear them,
Just fantasy land, I just can't believe that even existed.
Yeah.
That chapter in our lives existed and that we got to do it.
Yeah. Well, this has been great catching up with you, Ryan, and super fascinating. The Charlie Hustle, the Pete Rose musical, Survivor in a day. You're up to some really cool things. So I appreciate you taking some time and chatting all about it,
This has been so fun, man. If nothing else, just to catch up with you and see what you're up to. And congrats on the podcast. And it's good just to see your face. I hear your name all the time, just through different page friends, but I rarely link up with you. So this has been an honor to be on your show.
Oh yeah, well, thanks for coming on, and it's great to catch up with you and see you. And like I said, I just hope that I hope the play really takes off, or the musical really takes off. I think that's such a great idea, and you really just managed to recognize something great about that story and about Pete Rose the figure. So I wish nothing but great success with it. Hope it works out. Yeah, fingers crossed for sure.
Thank you very, very much.
And do you want to quickly? So you got. Can people follow that anywhere? Is there anywhere to stay up to date on what's happening with the musical?
With Pete Rose, for now it's just my social media. So I post whenever there's big news. So Instagram or Facebook, and then same with Survivor in a Day is on Instagram, just at Survivor in a Day, and you can see updates and when we're casting and all that kind of stuff. Just follow our challenges and stuff. I think we might be doing some live streaming in our game next Saturday, so you jump in and see some stuff. But yeah, as far as the play goes, I think it's just for now it's just social media.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll put those up here so people can see them. But it's been so great talking with you, Ryan. Again, thanks for doing it. Really cool.
Yeah, it's a thrill, man. Have a great day. Thanks for having me on.